Hello again. Hello. Final time today for me. You know why you're here. This is, it's fantastic. Hopefully quite a few of you were at the screening of More Bad News as well. How many of you were there, just out of interest? Yeah, and you would have known, we might talk about it. It's an interesting, because that was a new edit as well, which I thought was fantastic, and we might talk about that later on. I'll just quickly, I mean, the comic strip, as I mentioned before, the importance of saving up, you know, whatever Saturday job I had at the time to make sure that I had this book, the importance of every single time of just seeing that little intro as the bomb fell on the suburbs, and the fact that, you know, Channel 4, I think it's particularly for my generation, that moment in October 1982 where suddenly there was this disruptor that had come along, where suddenly there would be soap operas about Scouse union leaders, and the Daily Mail didn't merely have to be irate about the work of Dennis Potter. You know, they had even more work to do. They had to watch more channels. And Five Go Mad in Dorset, that night, was, I remember watching it, what was lovely as well is I couldn't rebel against my mum, because my mum loved Enid Blyton. So she loved Five Go Mad in Dorset so much, because it had such affection in it as well, that it meant she ended up loving alternative comedy as well because of that. So we are going to watch a half-hour film that Peter has put together, giving us some sense of who the comic strip were and are and what has been created. So we're going to watch that for half an hour. Then I'm going to be joined by Peter and Nigel, and we've then got some other outtakes and bits and pieces. But this is a celebration of, I think, one of the most, for my generation and for other generations, one of the most important TV movements of that time, and something, I mean, I'm pretty pissed off actually, because I could have had a nice job in an office, but I fucking watched their show and went, why don't I go into comedy? I imagine in 30 years' time, I'll be able to work for free over a weekend in Bristol. So, ladies and gentlemen, the comic strip presents. Ladies and gentlemen, Peter Richardson and Nigel Planer. Hello again. What I loved is I actually could hear some people in the audience mouthing along like the Rocky Horror Picture Show too. I just want to go to Swindon, and I mean that end piece. I do think is probably the most perfect bit of slapstick and also the only way that I've ever been able to listen to 5 minutes of Tony Hadley singing. And so I just, you know, the thought. Can you give us a little bit of a sense of how you choreographed that whole thing? That it's got everything, just the momentum and the...
I think it was just having the four of us, as Nigel said, you know, living in this sort of building, just, I think, increasing the pain at every stage, you know, and so adding more and more pain to it.
Quite a lot of pre-planning you did as well, because all that snow coming at us.
Yes, you put it afterwards. We did it afterwards, yeah.
Oh, you put that on afterwards, did
you? Well, not the second half is all real snow we have, but
right.
That was all blown in, thanks to the
you arranged for real snow.
Yeah. But it makes it look nice and cold and horrible.
Yeah. And you are a terrifying Mandelson as well, can I just say? The glacial, it really is.
I enjoyed that, yes, doing that one.
I wondered about, also, there does seem to be a sense, and certainly I know that both Dawn and Jennifer have talked about do you know what, I fancy dressing up as this. I'm going to write that. You know, they have talked in the past about Clint Eastwood and Sean Connery, and of course the Peter Wingard moment as well. There are certain parts that both you play where there seems to be just an extra little bit of revelry going, I'm allowed to go into the dressing up box and be this.
Yes, oh yes. Peter Wingard's voice was quite hard to get, actually. Did a lot of looping on that, doing the sound afterwards.
Who's been your Lee Van Cleef in GLC is fantastic, and obviously you have a great love of spaghetti westerns.
Yes. Well, especially A Few Dollars More. I think that was my favourite. I wasn't so keen on Once More Time in the West. But the music's great, isn't it? But I think Rick and I were both, when we were on tour in Australia, I think we all sat around talking about it. And of course, there's a character that Nigel plays in that, which we didn't have in that bit, but, which is really good. We started in our live show when we were at Roundhouse. Yeah, Paul.
The Mandrax freak.
He's a hitchhiker travelling through Spain, and they all come together.
Yeah. And he was the original main character in the show we were talking about earlier, Rank, that's the first piece that Peter and I wrote together. And also, looking at all those, we mustn't forget, there's one little shot of him, Pete Richards, who was who's now died, but who was your co-writer on all of those films that we've just seen, apart from Bad News. Obviously, that was written by Adrian, but Pete Richards was the what can you say behind it? The wit, an awful lot of the wit and the twist of the satire came from Pete.
Well, we did. We sort of I think we collaborated well.
Yeah, and really said there's one little shot of him, isn't there?
In Oxford, yeah.
In Oxford, yeah. He's in the foreground when the action's going on in the back. He always snuck in.
Because he pops up in Strike as well, doesn't he? I think he's in the hotel scene. There's few little moments.
Yes, he always has a little...
So who, in terms of a writing partnership, there's always that cliche, which I think is sometimes quite true, which is one person is the pacer and the other person is sat behind the laptop. And so what was the chemistry in terms of... Because you covered so many different areas and so many different styles.
I think each one worked differently. I think sometimes I probably came up with the storylines. I think that was my sort of thing, was putting the story. I mean, when we did Four Men, I think it was a lot of people injecting a lot of stuff on the day into. But we had the basic formula of what was going on there. But I think the Swindon line was Rick made up on the spot. So it was. Nigel, I think you did some. I think it was a bit like Bad News, with the four of us back together again.
That was, and it was quite some years later, wasn't it? When was it? We did the Four Men in a Car.
About 97, is it?
97, yeah, I think.
Of course, you were back at Channel 4 as well, hadn't
yes,
you?
Yeah, it was great to do that. I remember when we did Four Men in a Plane, sitting in, we had that plane in Spain, in the sort of deserty bit, and there were quite a lot of disagreements about how to proceed, and it started raining, and so we had to stop, and they put up the little umbrella-y things for the crew, but that wasn't enough because it started to rain quite a lot, and the argument, there's the four of us in the plane, and the argument sort of between us, I think Adrian disagreed with Peter's directing.
My vision.
His vision, yeah, just to put it politely. And Rick was sort of arsing about, and I just remember thinking, because I'd just been through all sorts of things, and then I'm back in this plane in the rain. The crew have disappeared over the horizon, and we're having the same kind of disagreements that we had like 20 years previously, and I just thought, this is great. I'm back, here we are in a plane that doesn't work. We can't start nothing's working. Everyone's disagreeing, and I think it was the shot where I'm meant to drive it.
Shame we haven't got a bit of the film actually to show you.
Yeah. I was meant to drive it, so I remember then driving off with the plane, not fly it, but just drive it around the desert. I'm thinking, this is just great.
The plane never left the ground, did it?
It's almost like a sort of dysfunctional family, isn't it? When you've got a band like that, it's like a family that you don't get to choose your siblings, do you? You don't. You other people aren't allowed to criticise them, but you can, with siblings. And that's how it felt with that.
It's over
with the
30
gang,
years, over
isn't
30,
it?
40 years, we sort of did quite a lot together.
So it's many years, isn't it, of disagreements.
Yes.
See, that's what I wondered about, how much it changed from. I mean, this script collection is the first series, the first 5, and I wondered how, at the start of writing, how certain you are who's going to be playing who. Who, you know, there are certain parts I think that must have had you in mind, Nigel, and certain parts, Peter, like in Gino, the cop, you know, the undercover cop, that seems to me now, that must have always been your part. But are there some that suddenly, sometimes did that move around?
I wanted to play Gino.
Oh, did you?
Yes, I wrote it for me to play.
Wow.
But I thought, no, I'm far too middle class to play this role convincingly. And Keith Allen, you know, well, he's trailer trash, isn't he? So sorry, Keith.
But there was, in Strike, originally, I thought I was going to play that part that Alexi played, and we went for lunch, and you did a big sort of smarmy, you know, well, maybe Alexi should play it, but I had to agree, because it's Alexi's much more right.
But also, it wasn't a
I'm
comedy
not right
part.
for that part.
You were playing comedy parts all the way through, then.
Yeah. I played all the other
parts.
parts. Alexi's much more right for that, the minor Strike character. But also Fun Seekers, which I wrote with Doug Lucy. That main part of Fun Seekers, I couldn't see that was me at all when we were writing it. I wrote it with Alexi in mind, thinking he'll play that part of the sort of misfit guy who is rejected from the 18 to 30 holiday because somebody finds his passport and he's 31. And he's a sort of a reject. And we took it to you, and you said, well, I like your part, Nigel, you know, that'd be great, you'll be good in that part. And so I find it very difficult to know I can't see it necessarily who's.
It's often who is available too.
Yeah, there's that.
Well, I wanted to ask about Alexi, because of course Alexi isn't in any of them until the 1987 series. And yet a lot of people would have known him as being part of
Supergrass, he came into that.
Oh yeah, of course, in the film. To TV stuff though, why did he never come in until, and then he has...
He sort of moved away from us, and in a sense, Robbie took over the big guy role, in a sense, you know, and Robbie was more of a comedy actor as well anyway, and Lexi was a good actor, but obviously his stand-up was becoming, his solo career was more important at that time. I don't think he wanted to be, I think he wanted to be separate from the comic strip. And then when we did Supergrass, and he was very good in that, jumping across the line with the policeman, you know.
Well, Supergrass, what I thought was rather wonderful, you know, the very sad news of Robbie Coltrane's death, but one of the clips that everyone returned to was that phenomenal walk in the storm to Frankie Goes to Hollywood's To Try, which is a remarkable cinematic piece, and which looks like utter madness on every occasion that you look at it.
Also completely pointless.
Yeah.
For the character, I've always thought...
Don't spoil it, Nigel.
Why does he think it's necessary to walk down the promontory and sit there? What does it do for the plot?
Because he's...
Why does he do that?
Because he's driven, he's angry. He's
driven and angry.
He's going to go sit there all night. He's going to get this boat, whatever it is.
It's to get a boat.
He's going to saw the boat up, isn't he? So he's going to saw this boat up.
Yeah, he's waiting for a boat to
Did you see the film?
Waiting for a boat. No, I think I've just seen that extract so many times. He just goes and sort of risks his life unnecessarily for...
Well, he jumps in. He's mad. He jumps in the water with a chainsaw going. Cuts the boat open. Based on a real story about a boat that was chainsawed open when it came into New York Harbour.
I remember that.
You remember that? Yes, it was, yeah.
And I wanted to ask as well about the guest stars, because we were talking about this before. There are, you know, Ronald Allen, first of all, starting in your
Better
very
Not
first episode.
Yes, Uncle
Just-
Quentin.
and he's so classy, and he brings something which is so, to see someone who's in a soap. And I think Mr. Hunter, I have to admit, I think he's in a different league altogether. There is something so daytime and glacial and perfect about him.
Yes.
But how did you first approach him for, well, initially Uncle Quentin?
Just going through Spotlight, actually thinking, who we're going to get to do? And then suddenly there was this person I remember seeing as a child in Compact. And I can remember when we went round to a neighbour's house for Christmas tea or something, they said, sorry, we've got to watch this programme, Compact, because we're addicted to it. And my parents didn't have television, they didn't want to watch it. But there he was, and I always remembered him from being, everyone. He had 20 million viewers for Crossroads, And so when I saw his picture, I thought, yeah, that's good, that'll be great.
And then in later films, Darren Nesbitt, another one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we were saying Darren Nesbitt, the strange thing about him is, if you don't know, Darren Nesbitt had the voice that was used a lot of times.
Where Eagles Dare was his big.
So you always, when you actually see him speaking in a film, like in Strike, when he's the chauffeur, you presume he's been dubbed, because you don't realise he's the dubber. He dubs everyone else. And he was, again, those are Sandra Dawn and then suddenly getting, Alan Peele in Gino and in Susie, yes. And then in Eat the Rich. It felt to me, and I think you mentioned backstage, I'd always got that feeling that there was a similar style to John Waters in terms of going, there's a lot of interesting characters who are not necessarily known as actors,
I don't know.
who...
Well, did you remember watching Female Trouble? Do you remember the John Waters film?
John Waters, yeah, I remember
the one Devonport, is it?
The Divine. What was the Flamingo? Pink Flamingo.
Yes, Female Trouble was the better one, I thought.
Yeah.
But, so yes, Pete and I were very influenced by that, and we liked. So Eat the Rich was an attempt to try and do a sort of homage to a rip-off of John Waters.
Well, I still love it, and I think it has a similar feel to that beautiful moment at the end of Pink Flamingos, where Divine's giving a press conference and the press go, "What are your policies?" And she goes, "Kill everyone now," which is just the most beautiful. So I wanted to also ask about because of course you went on to be the director, but in that first series, you have Bob Spears, who was very much a kind of mainstream, Fawlty Towers, very good track record.
Yeah, TV studio director, and he hadn't done much filming, oddly enough. No.
And Sandy Johnson, who, of course, they were the two in those first series. So
yeah.
what was, how did you find them, or was that Michael White, or who put you two together, or the group together in that?
Well, we had this deal with Channel 4, and obviously we had to find directors, and I think our agent found Bob, who just left the BBC, and Sandy had just come out of film school, I think, hadn't he?
I think so, yeah. I was impressed how you, because we were coming straight from our live clubs, and I was impressed how you shadowed Bob, because obviously, I knew you always wanted to direct, but Bob directed on War and Beat Generation. And you were not messing about anymore, and you kind of shadowed him at everything he did.
Well, it was a collaboration.
Notes.
I was very much looking. I was choosing the locations and I guess the costumes and the casting.
Okay, maybe he was shadowing you.
Well, no, I think it was certainly yeah. He had all that technique in terms of timing and making sure that, because film time is so much quicker than so much. No, what am I trying to say? It's not like real life. A minute in film is a long time, and so you get used to the fact that film time has got to be a lot quicker. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the thing you start to learn about that is thinking, oh, this shot is wonderful, but in the end you cut it because it's too long or something. But so pacing is very important. Bob had that, and he was very good at. He basically shot it like a TV thing. You always a sort of master and two singles kind of thing, which is the kind of that's when you've got everything covered. Really,
Unlike the opening you were talking about it earlier, the opening sequence of Four Men in a Plane, which was the most fun ever to be doing that. It's one long shot like the opening of Touch of Evil, the Orson Welles film, and we were at Stansted Airport. And it was a working airport. We didn't close it down. We had monitors, runners at various stages to say cameras there, go, action, because it has about 4 scenes in it, 4, 5?
I suppose so, yes.
One shot, the camera's up on the crane, comes down as Rick walks in, as it were, then the wagon goes past, the cameraman gets off, he's got a steady cam, he walks round, there's a scene with me talking to getting my ticket, it then comes round, Rick's now doing down that way. I mean, it's 4 or 5 scenes in a row, and then you're in the chemist, and there's still not a cut. It's like, how many minutes long is that?
It looks quite flashy, but it's just choreographed.
You've got to choreograph a whole airport. You know, come on. It's not bad.
Yes, you
and there's
passengers move
no
over there.
passers-by. We did it very discreetly, so there's no passers-by suddenly looking at the camera. And how many takes did you get for that?
I don't know, probably a couple, 2 or 3, wasn't it? We didn't. I mean, it's quite a long.
No, it was pretty impressive. I thought, and it really it's really exciting in the opening sequence of that, because you think, oh, we're in. What's going? We're at the airport. Oh, what's that? Oh, something passes through. We'll follow that. It's. I mean, that's.
I think that's what coming from Bad News. What was good in More Bad News was seeing 4 of us all together on the screen at the time, and I think that's what I want to do with the 4 men thing, was keep us all working. So you've got 4 faces working on the screen.
But the control of the camera, I was very impressed with that. I thought this is we're really making movies now, you know, with the work like that. Superb, that opening sequences, I think.
We're also, sorry, Pete.
I was saying, do you want any questions?
Yeah, I would take questions. We're going to show clips actually. Some other, but I was thinking that, you know, Stephen Frears as well. You know, I think Mr. Jolly Lives Next Door is the last time he made a film with the line, "Quick, get us out of here before I shit myself." And, you know, I think the next thing he had was Dangerous Liaisons or something like that. He had suddenly had a Hollywood hit, but, you know, he did that. He did Consuela, I think. Was that Stephen Frears?
He did Consuela, The Bullshitters, and Mr. Jolly.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting, you know, in terms of his career. Gumshoe, 1971 with Albert Finney, a lot of TV work. And then, so how did Stephen Frears and you get to work together?
Because I was working with Keith on The Bullshitters, and we sacked the director about 2 days before the shoot, because we didn't like him. And then, so Stephen said, I know, we'll ask Stephen Frears, because Channel 4 said, look, it's cancelled, we're not making this. But when we said, oh, we got Stephen Frears, they went, what's the Stephen Frears? And we went, yeah, so and Stephen said, where are we shooting? And we said, well, yeah, we got locations. He said, right, I'll see you Monday then. He turned me. And he'd say, I don't, listen, you do this. I don't do pub scenes, so you do that one. He was very funny with Rick and Abe, because they were working for gags, you know, working for laughs. He said, I don't shoot gags, I shoot scenes. So anyway, he said, well, let's go through this scene. And so they got the script out, and he said, right, read it out for me. And he was doing this, kind of pointing his fingers at what he's going to do. And at the end, they got to the end, and he said, and that's the scene, is it? And they said, yes. He said, how depressing. Right.
It was interesting, because a lot of your things, I think, work really well on the big screen. I remember the first time I saw Mr. Jolly was on the big screen in a double bill with Didn't You Kill My Brother, and it felt too big for the big screen. It's now, I love it, but on the big screen, all of that vomit and chaos and poor Nicholas Parsons' panic somehow felt overbearing in a way that More Bad News and Strike didn't.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of... Right, we're going to take some questions, but before that, let's have a look at some outtakes from Fistful of Traveller's Checks.
Ooh, never seen this.
Hay que apretar más, estar más concentrados, más en el entrenamiento, porque con eso no nos está dando y tenemos que...
I feel sexy now.
Yes, I feel pretty raunchy myself.
Hey, you guys, yeah? How you doing? Everyone there? Hey, no. You got the horse? Horse? Come on. Adventure. Henrietta. You think I'm going to get naughty with that?
Please, it's yours till 6 o'clock.
I don't think I'm that kinky. And I don't think you're going to have any breakfast in the morning, if you know what I'm talking about.
Wait. We need horses. How much, amigo? £2,000 each. Wait. Somebody's taking my traveler's checks.
We're doing this all wrong, amigo.
Well, we've got no money, no horses. People are going to think we're right tossers now, aren't they? Shit.
Oh, well, don't get overexcited, Michael. Look, I've got heaps and heaps of traveller's checks back at the hotel.
I don't care, I'm going home.
Oh, look, we've come on holiday to enjoy ourselves and do the whole spaghetti thing. Let's make the best of it, shall we?
No, we should have gone to Cuba, like I said. Pretend to join the revolution. That would have been a laugh. No, you said we've got to go to Spain.
Look, cheer up, Michael. Please. Please? I think I know where we can get some horses.
See why they went in the film.
See, I love all the laughter, and I don't know if you've heard the same story. You know, whenever you watch a Sergio Leone, there's always a ha ha ha.
Yes.
But you've heard the reason that there's so much laughter is when they actually went to translate the script, they went, Jesus Christ, this is awful. So a lot of it is actually that the character did not in their own language. They weren't laughing. They've added a laugh. So they've gone, just have them say, and now you, amigo, and then we'll just have a sound of laughter rather than this shit script.
Yes, that's right. But also to cover up the fact they're doing so many languages.
Yes. Who would like to ask a question? Yes, just over there. I'll tell you what, the mic will just get to you, and just so everyone can hear.
I can remember with great fondness watching the first film on the launch of Channel 4 in 1982, and I want to personally thank you for your extraordinary legacy of work over the years. My question is, do you have any ideas for any more films?
Do I have some? Yeah, yes, several. I've got a drawer full of them.
Notice how he carefully tried to steal your ideas. A typical thing there. Could you tell me? So you were. Would you? I mean, is there a possibility of the comic strip doing another thing together then?
It'd be lovely. I mean, we were going to make one this summer with Channel 4.
God,
We had a great part for Nigel playing Dominic Cummings. It was the. And he would be fantastic.
I'd done some weeks, you know, prep, looking in the mirror, listening to Cummings. I was ready. I was ready to.
It was called Lie Another Day, the Boris story. It was.
Lie Another Day.
Lie Another Day.
Yeah.
Who was going to be Boris?
Well, we didn't have Boris yet.
Right.
That was one of the things, but the money sort of didn't come. Sadly, the whole deal went wrong on us. But and also Boris then left the scene, and then Liz Truss took over, and then so by the time the film was going to come out, we were going, Boris who, you know.
Oh, if only! What a joy that would be.
Boris who would be.
Who else would like to ask a question? Yes, just down at the front there. Thank you.
I've heard a lot of stories about Keith Allen being quite temperamental just throughout his career. I was wondering what it was like working with him on quite a few comic strip episodes.
Nightmare. You work all right with him.
I worked with him in comic strip and also in something called Marcella recently, and I've always, for some reason, he ends up snogging me in the story. Not for real, but he's fairly for real when he.
Well, he had to snog me in the Bullshitters as well. It was.
Yeah.
No, actually, I had a great time working with Keith. I mean, he's incredibly volatile. He's got amazing ideas and energy, and so it was. And he likes to be outrageous. So I'm sort of dragging him. Yeah.
I've heard about some of the meals that he had with Harold Pinter and Danny Dyer, and they sound very interesting. And there may well be a comic strip to be made out of that. Anyone else like? Yes, right at the back there. Keep your hand up just so have you got the mic already?
Just two things. Just what do you think of like comedy now, and dare I say the dreaded word woke? What do you think of comedy now? And also, Fawlty Towers reboot, good idea, bad idea?
Fawlty Towers what?
Fawlty Towers reboot.
You know, John Cleese is with his daughter.
I can't see it. Maybe, I mean, it'd be great if it works. but I don't have a good feeling. I think
it was so wonderful what he did before, though.
Yeah.
I mean, the energy was so great. I mean, whether he's got that same energy.
He gives off a completely different vibe nowadays, doesn't he? Which is, you know, and they're going to set it in America, in the Caribbean, with his daughter who's American. I mean, John Cleese is American now, really. He is. I mean, he lives in... Doesn't he live in Belize now?
St. Lucia? No.
Somewhere. I mean, so he's a very, very different man from, you know, who he was, and it doesn't sound good. And I can also imagine that some executive has said, "Oh, you're going to do it in the Caribbean? That's great. In a luxury hotel? That's great. White Lotus did really well.
Yes, of course. Yes.
So we'll do it, you know." And it doesn't. I mean, I'd love to be proved wrong, but it doesn't have a good feel to me.
Well, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because he had an incredible energy at the O2 when they brought back Python. It was
I
like,
missed that.
and he was
still
very funny and very quick. But I know what you mean, that incredible tension in Cleese in the 1970s between, you know, that Englishness.
A gang of
everything is kept in, but now sadly he doesn't keep everything in. So that's kind of, you know, and it's. And there was a first part of that question that we slightly missed. I think about what was that?
Yeah, just about comedy these days. Now, I say the word woke, probably heard of that word. I mean, is that fitting well with comedy? It seems to be everywhere.
Well, you have to remember first, well, it's everywhere mainly from the right wing who are using it for a culture war. And the second thing is, remember what alternative comedy was. Alternative comedy was exactly, this is the thing we have to remember, because we get middle-aged and then we think that everyone got to the right point of revolution when we were 20 and anything further is too much. And I'm sorry to start, it's something that I find very interesting. It comes up a lot. It really hasn't made, you know, TV people are cowardly generally anyway, so that's always happened. And alternative comedy was about saying, do you know what? The sexism, racism, and all of those tropes and stereotypes are slightly tiresome, and they're two-dimensional. So I think comedy should always be, and also we shouldn't worry too much. You know, Ricky Gervais is still paid $30 million to do the stuff that he does, and Jimmy Carr is still on television. And if you're looking at the biggest names making the largest amount of money, they are still, you know, these are, to a lot of the younger comics, they're kind of Bernard Manning figures, you know, so really, which they don't like, of course, because they want to be loved by James Acaster.
I think what Barry Cryer said, though, was he said, I remember him talking about this, and he said, but people aren't allowed to be silly anymore, which is, it's all, yeah, and I think that's what people are missing.
Yes, silly is what we
want.
Which
what Rick and Abe was silly, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of that bottom stuff, you know, which they didn't want any more of that, you know.
And I, with the comic strip, what I loved when I was 13 and still love now was I loved never knowing what it was going to be, where the violence was going to be, where the strangeness was going to be. You know, we talked about, you know, Les Dogs, or is it Les Dogs or Les Dogs?
Les Dogs, yeah.
Yeah, which I love. It's got so many weird things going on in it. And I would imagine that would probably be quite hard to get made now. And it's bloody Kate Bush is in it. You've got some amazing stuff with Alexi. There's so many things in that. And that's what I would like to see. I would like to see more invention and fewer panel shows, really.
It's very expensive, that's the trouble. I mean, it costs so much to make those. You know, they can make 4 panel shows for the cost of one of ours, you know.
What about you, Nigel? Do you worry about the what people aren't allowed to say or any of these things?
I think it's a shame that things in the past, I think when we tend to try and think, well, we've got it right, this generation, this new ideology, this is right. So everything in the past, and it's not looked back on with sympathy as if the people had agency. Like, when you asked the question, I was thinking about something like Little Britain, which now Matt and David have to say, oh no, we regret doing that, and that was awful, and we'd never do that nowadays because, you know, can we have a job in Bake Off or whatever they're doing, which is, you know, it's understandable, but I think that's a shame because it was really funny. I felt, Little Britain, and that it was very edgy. They took things to the edge. And if, as you say about Ricky Gervais, if there are issues which are a bit, causing people anxiety, then it's a pretty good thing to expose them and ridicule them and be silly about them. And I thought Little Britain did that on issues of, race, disability and gender and all of those things. I thought Little Britain stirred it all up and brought it into the open in what I felt was a healthy way. But now, they're not going to repeat it. It's like a totally. It's as if the BBC are ashamed of it. The guys who made it are ashamed of it. And I do think that's it's looking back at the past, because we may have a new attitude now, but we should be more generous to what people thought in the past.
People are very scared to be controversial now. That's the trouble.
I'm not sure they are. I don't know. I mean, the other night, Jordan Gray, a trans woman, ended up playing the piano with her penis. And that still seems to be pushing the button, pushing it a little bit. So, there's still... I think that's...
on the 6 o'clock telly or when?
Yeah, reading the news. It was the only way they could get the teleprompter to work was by bouncing the penis up and down on the thing. But yeah, I think there's... I mean, it is interesting, the Little Britain case, where something like League of Gentlemen, which I think was very important, actually, something like Little Britain existing. Mark Gatiss actually was the script editor, and you can definitely see his touch in that first series. I think that's still... And that was a very dark piece of work, and what they still do on Inside Number 9, and, I think, yeah, it's there's lots of mainstream stuff, and there's lots of weird stuff, and I think generally the problem is that television it does feel like there's just not much going on there. It doesn't feel like vibrant. You have to go to streaming places to find where the interesting things are going on. Where the risk
you have to go where
streaming, kind of like that. The anyone else like to ask a question? Yes, down the front, Jem, and then we'll take that one back there.
Returning to Eat the Rich, just a little sort of two-part question. First of all, I'd be really interested to hear about how Paul McCartney got involved in being in Eat the Rich. And also, given the last 12 years of what's happened in this country, would it not be a perfect time roundabout now for an Eat the Rich 2?
I didn't quite understand.
So Paul McCartney, when he pops in the dining scene, yes.
What do you want to say?
How did he end up in there?
Oh well, I think because we had unknown people playing all the leads, we tried then to get as many famous people to play the small parts. So a reverse situation really, to prop up and get the money to make the films. But he agreed to be in it. I think he thought he was going to be in the young ones actually, and he turned up thinking thought it was an episode of the young ones. But
where's Neil? He thought.
Where's Neil?
And what was the other part was, sorry?
Time for an Eat the Rich 2.
Yeah, Eat the Rich 2.
Eat the Rich 2. I'm not very keen on the Eat the Rich 1, actually, to be honest.
But Nosha Powell, again, in terms of your
Nosha
casting,
Powell.
big Ron, blah, 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 Rio, blah, 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 and then suddenly he's the centre stage.
I know.
And it was Sandra Dawn again, wasn't it?
Dawn,
Yeah.
yes. He was good, Nosha, and he was people did like him, He came round and the first morning, he had 90 pages of dialogue to learn. He said, "I want you to know the fight scenes are going to be amazing." I said, "You've got a lot of dialogue to do first."
That's why I love that film set because of Jimmy Fagg and Nosha, and again Ronald Allen.
Lemmy and all those.
Yeah, wonderful. Who else? I was back there. Yes, right at the back. Is that you, Mitch? Yes. Oh, you don't need a microphone then.
Microphone anyway. Was actually switched. Oh yeah, this is. With the last Channel 4 run, you're starting to bring in performers from, if you like, subsequent comedy generations like Stephen Mangan, like you go from the In-Betweeners, that kind of thing. At the time, I was rather hoping that this is the sign that maybe you were going to try and bring in, newer performers and sort of keep the comic string thing going almost by becoming like the elder statesman and kind of passing it on to like a subsequent generation. Was that the idea, and indeed could that still be the idea if you want?
Yes, of course. As we got older, we needed younger people to come and play the younger parts. that was it, really. I suppose we just got too old to play certain roles, you know.
And Maxine Peake was fantastic as well.
Maxine, yeah. Steve Mangan and what's James Buckley from the In-Betweeners.
It was the idea, to do that, but again, it's not like Channel 4 or any TV station say, what do you want to do next? You know, how much money would you like to do it with? And, you know, how long do you want to do it? That's not the situation. And, you know, however, like Peter was saying, the script we had this summer, that's on, then it's off, then it's on, then it's off. And you know, that's...
They used to be very supportive, didn't they?
2 years' work, something like that, to try and get something on and certainly get something made. And therefore, you know, with the best of intentions, it doesn't... I mean, it sounds stupid. It doesn't get any easier to get people to part with money and put your stuff on television, give you a slot on broadcast, especially if, like the comic strip, there's no follow-through, because the disadvantage, you know, Deborah Meaden was right there, saying that's not a good business plan. It hasn't been a good business plan from the beginning to do a different story with possibly a different cast every time is absolute commercial suicide. And that's the wonderful thing about the comic strip, but it's also it's
one of its faults.
Big flaw, you know, because the broadcasters don't go, how many of these can you give me? That's great. You mean we can get something like House, you know, the thing Hugh Laurie did. How many episodes of that did he make? And it's the same episode. Every week, and people love that, and they love selling that, and they love buying it, and that's where you will get to do work. You'll get to do it if you get something that's a format and you repeat the format and it's working and it's successful, and people like to see that character basically solving the same kind of thing every week. That's good telly. That's where they'll give you the money.
They expect more control now as well. They expect to have a lot more control than they used to.
Yeah.
They used to trust you to do something funny, and if you didn't deliver, then you didn't gasp back, you know.
Yeah.
That was the way it worked usually. You know.
But so it's pretty much hit and miss, you know.
By its nature, yeah.
By the very notion of we're going to do different ones if we don't care, and we're not going to have the same cast. It's not like Friends, you know. Oh, Robbie's not in this one. Oh, suddenly it's different. Oh, this is a slightly different type of humour, and that's a really hard sell. So even on the early days, the international sales were really poor, and we wouldn't be selling a whole series because people said we want, we like that famous 5. Could we have 18 of them? And you said, well, we do have 18 episodes, but there's only 2 of them that are about the famous 5. And they said, well, we'll just buy, if you're lucky, they say, well, we'll just buy the famous 5 then, those 2 episodes. So you're always, it's like you're reinventing and trying to raise money for a movie every time. And that's, I don't know how you keep going, because it's exhausting. Isn't it?
Yeah.
You must be knackered, you know. Yeah. Because trying to raise the money for a new movie each time, and yet it's only a half hour and it's part of it's.
Well, that's why when I went in Stella Street was because it was just me and a camera and 2 actors, and we did everything ourselves, you know. So we could make it for very little money, but the comic strip does take a lot of money to make, you know, as you can see from. Taking, you know, shooting on a motorway like we did with... Actually, it was just 4 of us, really, wasn't it, most of the time?
Yeah, but there was a lot of cars going past.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And did you have to close that side of the motor? We weren't on a motorway. We were on a
we did bits
airfield,
of... We did bits of both, didn't we? We did sort of...
Yeah, some was by the side of the motorway, and then the rest was on an airfield.
The airfield we did when the cars...
When the cars actually
jockeying like
smashed, that's it, and you cut the 2 things
But we did
together.
shoot on a main road as well.
Yeah.
Have we got any more questions from? Yes, in the middle there. Microphone will just be coming to you. Can we have a round of applause for the people who've been running around with the microphone?
Yeah.
Hi. My favourite series is probably the third one, where the films are sort of lengthier than the earlier ones and the BBC ones. I was kind of curious what it was like to adapt the comic strips to longer scripts. How the sort of transition happened there.
So the transition in the third series, where you went from being predominantly about 28 minutes or so, I suppose, into doing, the kind of 50-minute.
50 minutes, yes. I think because it actually, the money you get to do a 50 it makes it much easier to make the films, because it's not that much more expensive to make a 50 than a 30. So basically you're aiming to do a 45-50 because you've got a bigger budget. But that extra 15 minutes is not necessarily that much more costly, if you know what I mean.
Is that why we did it?
Well, it's...
I never knew
actually, no, but, yeah. But also I think our story, we were trying to make stories that were bigger, I suppose the stories we did were slightly bigger films, I think the Pythons had this thing that, you could do anything up to 50 minutes, but after that, you start to get into real problems in terms of feature-length comedies.
You have to have a plot that is actually going
Yes, you need a really good plot to take you after that.
It's actually going to have a subplot and a thing, and
you can ride up to about 45-50 minutes with a kind of a loose story, pretty much, but...
And then if you're allowed to go up to 3 hours, you don't need a plot at all if you've watched any Marvel movies, where they just go, why is this 3.5 hours long?
So much these days, yes, I agree.
I think we've just about run out of time, so I wanted to just ask you, what is your favourite character that you ever played in the comic strip? That's to both of you. Which is the one you thought, do you know what, I'd love to return to that?
Ask him first.
Go on then, right. What do you think, Nigel?
I really like, the one that springs to mind, I really liked the one we saw today, Spaghetti Hoops, the Calvi. I don't know why, I just had
Yes.
I just loved playing that.
And it's a very stylish piece of work, that one, I think, as well, Spaghetti Hoops.
Yeah.
It really stands out.
And the hair took about 8 months to grow back. And what about you?
I think I like playing Spider, actually. I did enjoy that.
Right. Spidey's good, Spider.
He's much nicer than me, I think.
And I should mention that Nigel has now got... what's your Patreon thing that you've got now? What's the actual address? What do people need to look up?
Patreon.com/my name, Nigel Planer.
Nigel Planer. So patreon.com/Nigel Planer.
Where I've got all my... everything that I ever recorded off the telly, because that's what you used to have to do on VHS, converted it... it's all digitised by Jonathan, who's over there. And just putting out everything really gradually on this Patreon account. What's going out this month is Peter and I's original Outer Limits sketches, which were on a show 1982.
Friday night and Saturday morning.
1982, called Friday Night and Saturday Morning, and we did 2 sketches, which were the ones we were doing live in the comic strip club. One's called AC/DC 10, and the other was called Are You Being Severed? And they're sort of, there are sketches, they're about 6 minutes each.
I suppose so, yeah.
Something like that, yes. Anyway, they're going out on my Patreon this month, last month. At some point I put out I found a recording of the gig we did, of the Bad News gig we did at Hammersmith Odeon. So that went out on there. And what else? Lots of stuff. Oh, Neil doing, I did a week on MTV in New York of Neil being a VJ on MTV. So I've gathered all that up. That's going out that's out there now. And then I did a pilot of something called Oh No, Not Them, which was an American version of The Young Ones, which didn't work.
Just slight changes, like no Rick character, which
no
of
Rick
course will not have in any way changed the balance of the show.
No,
yeah. but I've found an I've got a copy of it, so I'm bunging that out on Patreon. And Robin and I are going to sit and do a commentary. So you'll have a commentary.
Because I've never seen it, and I said to Nigel, I don't want to see any, and give me no clues. And you've just, the couple of morsels you've given me means I think I'm in for, quite a, well, I don't, treat in the strangest, I suppose, ways.
Yeah.
So go and find out about that.
Pretty good on that, actually. That's the only good thing in it. It's by the guy who did the titles for the same musician and an animator, claymation, for The Simpsons. It's almost the same music and the same idea of they gradually collect up, they come in and they sit down on the sofa. And it's like a prototype. It was before The Simpsons. So it's a prototype of The Simpsons. And that's good, that's worth watching. It's just when me and the American actors come on.
I think, the context, though, will mean it's definitely worth...
I mean, it's definitely worth a look, because it's pretty garish stuff.
Well, when I mention it to people, they do, that it has that lost treasure of, oh my God, I wonder how wrong it was.
Yeah.
You know, that excitement. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming down. Thank you very much to the Slapstick Festival, as usual. There's a Scaffolder on tonight, I think, with Harry Hill. I think that's 8:30, as far as I remember. Loads of stuff on tomorrow, including All You Need Is Cash, the Ruttles, Watershed at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. And let's just have a big round of applause for all of the people who volunteer and help make this wonderful.
Yeah,
and
thanks for coming.
Peter Richardson, Nigel Planer.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we go.
Huh?
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.